And I think it's very easy a lot of times for high achievers, which I would put myself in that category, to let our mind, it's a mind over matter, right? To be so goal oriented that we're like, okay, I'm going to make this happen, and not check in with our heart.
On this episode of the Creator Community, we'll meet Terry McDougall, a mother, an executive coach and leadership consultant with relentless curiosity and a passion for learning, and alumni author of New Degree Press Publishing. We'll hear how Terry, a first-generation college student in her family, took the leap of faith and left the comfort of corporate America as a senior leader in marketing and financial services to start her own business. We'll follow Terry's journey that took her through left brain training at a global coaching organization and how she complemented that work by also attending workshops at the world famous Second City Improv School. We'll learn how this thoughtful path led Terry to solidifying herself as a thought leader through her work and book, Winning the Game at Work. Check out the show. Welcome to the Creator Community. This is a podcast from book publisher New Degree Press. I'm your host, John Saunders. This show is designed to celebrate, elevate, and showcase many of the incredible authors that have published their books with NDP. This year, NDP will cross over 1,200 published authors. This episode is a special one where we talk to authors who have actually published their books already. They've gone through the program over a year ago, and we want to check in with them and learn about what's going on in their lives now, how that journey has shaped their lives and their careers, and what they've been up to since bringing their books to the world. Today, I have the great privilege of having Terry McDougall with me. Terry is a former corporate marketing executive turned certified professional coach, podcast host of her own show, Marketing Mambo, which is now up to 57 episodes, and of course, author of her book, Winning the Game of Work from New Degree Press. Terry founded her executive and career coaching company, Terry B. McDougall Coaching, after leaving a long and successful marketing career in asset management. Terry, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
John, it's really great to be here. I'm excited for our conversation.
Thank you for joining us. It's always such a pleasure to meet people that have gone through the program and find out, what they've been up to. But let's dig a little bit deeper into your bio, Terry. Tell us a little bit more about your career journey. How does someone go from marketing executive to career coach? What prompted that?
Well, I worked for 30 years in marketing. The majority of my career was spent in financial services marketing. The last company that I worked for, I was there for 12 years, and I had 4 different roles in that time. And the last role that I was in was one that I just didn't really feel like was a good fit. And it led me to really start doing some introspection to say, what would I like to do next? And when I looked within the company, I didn't really see anything that was, was looking interesting to me, as a next logical step in my career. So I went back to some advice that I got early in my career about what you should do to lead a happy and successful career. And I said to myself, what am I good at? And what do I like to do? I liked marketing. And obviously I have the Marketing Mambo podcast, and I'm doing that because it's a passion. I love marketing. But when I thought about what excited me at that point in my career, it was really about the people. It was about sitting across the desk from a business leader and understanding their problems and co-creating solutions for them, or mentoring and coaching people that were on my team to help them be more effective. And so I just realized that my interests were sort of shifting a little bit from actually doing the marketing to maybe influencing and helping people be more effective in their careers. At first, it was just going to be a sabbatical. I leave my job and go and get a coaching certification. But in the midst of that 8 months that I was going through the program, I decided to just go ahead and take a flyer and start my own business. And I figured, if it doesn't work out, I can always get another job. But it's been close to 5 years since I left my job, and I'm still out here running my business. So
that is awesome.
So
you were on the corporate track, going through the career paces, moving up the ladder, working in marketing. I think there was a story where the pinnacle of marketing, right? The CMO position. And somewhere in there, you interviewed for a CMO spot thinking, this is what I ultimately want to do. What happened?
Yeah. There? Well, during that time where I was sort of in that last role and I was like, what do I want to do next? I mean, I was interviewing for other jobs and I got a very plum opportunity. It was to be chief marketing officer for a large division of another bank. And, I was flown into their headquarters. I met with all of the senior leaders and so forth. And I found myself feeling kind of ambivalent about it. It really was the thing that I'd been working my whole career for. If you'd asked me earlier, like even mid-career, like, what do you want to do? Oh, it's to grab that brass ring of being the chief marketing officer. And, interviewed. I actually did not get the job. And when they called me and let me know that I didn't get the job, I wasn't disappointed. I was relieved. And that told me something. It told me that that wasn't the right path for me, and I think it's very easy a lot of times for high achievers, which I would put myself in that category, to let our mind, it's a mind over matter, right? To be so goal oriented that we're like, okay, I'm going to make this happen, and not check in with our heart, right? To say, yeah, but do you want this to happen? Right. And I think that I really didn't want that to happen. I wanted to do something different. I hadn't quite yet figured out what it was, but I think part of me knew that the path that I was on was not leading to the fulfillment that I really desired in my life.
Fulfillment, happiness, defining success, I think is part of this story here, right? And
yeah,
I mean, how fascinating. I think so many of us think, oh, geez, I've got to get sort of the C title on my resume at some point. And here you are, you get the opportunity. They don't give it to you. You made it through a number of rounds of interviews and you felt relieved. I mean, how fascinating.
Yes. Right. Yeah, I was not disappointed at all. And I was like, wow. I remember getting the call and I was like, wow, I don't even care, right? I did not feel anything negative about it. I actually felt sort of, like I said, relieved. So it's interesting about, the knowledge and the wisdom that our bodies have that sometimes we forget to check in with,
So it was literally a physical reaction you felt from this experience that your body just kind of.
I just relaxed, because I didn't have to make a decision. I think the reality was that had I gotten the offer, I probably would have turned it down, but I hadn't really gone there yet. And it's, again, being so goal oriented, I'd been sort of trained in my career to go for the gusto, go for the gold. Right. So I was doing that. Right. Well, I was doing that. And then, there was, I can remember during that whole process that I had a little bit of a knot in my stomach, right? So there was a certain level where I didn't feel comfortable with what I was doing. And I just didn't take the time to stop and ask those questions. Like, is this what you really want? And so I think that when that knot loosened up and I felt relieved, that was sort of the answer that no, this is not really what you want.
So as you went through this and had these visceral, physical reactions to it and made these bigger decisions, figured out your passion was for really helping drive others, collaborate with others, build their effectiveness. What else do you think, anything else you learned about yourself through that journey that you found impactful in your life?
Oh, gosh. One of the things that I thought about a lot is that, when I was in the corporate world, I call myself kind of entrepreneurial because I always would take on big challenges and go sort of into these ambiguous situations where, what was required wasn't really clear. I was willing to go and take risks within that environment. And there was part of me that really yearned for, more freedom. And I've thought of this kind of imagery a lot that I feel like in a lot of ways, it was analogous to me like being in a dive plane, like a skydiving plane and the doors to the plane being open and me like having my parachute on and looking out the window and saying, man, I really want to jump. I really want to jump. And then I was scared, I was scared to jump because I spent all these years getting direct deposit in my account every 2 weeks. And I was like, I was so afraid that if I jumped, I'm just going to get a splat and hit the ground. So, obviously I've jumped. And I still feel like I'm kind of in free fall. I'm able to do the somersaults and, all the tricks in the air. And it's really wonderful to have the freedom to be out here doing things. But what I realized was that a lot of times we don't really consciously face up to our fears. and we'll allow them to sort of like exist in the back of our mind and impact our behavior, right? Like that, where you're not doing the thing that you want to do because like there's like some, kind of distant feeling like something bad's going to happen. And I really had to bring that to the surface and look at that and say, what are you really afraid of? And in the beginning, I was really afraid, like, oh, my family's going to end up on the street. We're going to be destitute. And I had to keep saying, is that really true? Like, what's going to happen, if you do this? And if it doesn't work out the way that you hope it will, what's going to happen? And I had to look at my savings and everything and be like, no, this isn't going to happen, right? Like, it's natural that maybe I fear that, but because it is a big change from how I've made money in the past, but, I had to face up to it and I had to step into it. I had to lean into it. And then I had to, start doing the things that you need to do as an entrepreneur so that, you do have money coming in.
So fear is in all of us, right? And I love this analogy to skydiving. Side note, have you ever been skydiving?
No.
So
No.
I have. And I can tell you, when they open that door and you're sitting in this plane and you're staring at Mother Earth, thousands of feet below you, I don't know if panic quite captures the word to describe that moment.
It's just like, terror. Yeah.
Like, now jump out. You're like, wait, what? Why would I jump out of this perfectly good airplane?
Yeah. Yeah.
Once you get out there, it's the most euphoric thing ever. And you want to do it again immediately. But man, that moment before you go is crazy. So great analogy that you use there. So how, what lessons can others take from your, first of all, why do people not want to face those fears? And what lessons can we take away from your story, you think, listeners, about how to face their fear and make a leap of faith as you did?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing is that most people don't understand what controls their behavior. Like what controls behavior is our beliefs, and sometimes when we've been conditioned in a certain way, naturally, like I worked for 30 years in the corporate world and I got direct deposit every 2 weeks, right? So like naturally my belief was that in order to quote unquote make a living, I have to go to work for another organization and that's how I get money, right? If that's my belief, and then I am going to feel fear if I say, oh, I'm going to do something different, right? But I had to kind of pull that belief up to the surface and say, is this the only way to make money? And the answer, of course, is no, right? I'm a marketer, right? I know that you can make money in a lot of different ways, right? It doesn't have to come in like, every 2 weeks. But I think most people don't go deep. Like when they're feeling that fear or whatever feeling, anger, sadness, whatever, it's being triggered by a belief that, something's happened and it's hitting that belief and it's causing, almost an automatic emotional reaction. And then whatever that emotional reaction is causes us to behave in a certain way. Like, so in my case, maybe it's like avoiding, going out and becoming an entrepreneur, because I believed that was the only way that I could make money is working for a company. Right. So I think just people don't go deep. They don't ask themselves, like, where's this coming from? What's the belief? And is this belief true? Are there ways that this belief might be replaced with something else that might serve me better?
It's really interesting to think about this idea of beliefs. And as you shared that, I was thinking about, beliefs and how they relate to our identity, right? And how is that identity shaped? And can we change it? And so many times I talk to folks in my career on Wall Street as a coach now, and I see people that, I hate to use the cliche sort of limiting beliefs, but they're out there. And so many times, if I haven't done it before, it's this sort of existency bias. If I haven't done it before, I can't do it. So therefore, I'm going to just keep doing what I'm doing. So
yes,
what would you say to someone who's feeling that sort of fear that I'm sitting on the couch, I know my life isn't fulfilling. Where do I go next? What do I do here?
Well, the first thing I would say is that, it's natural to feel fear if you believe that doing something different is going to be risky. And at the same time, you've got to look at what's going on in the context and say, okay, well, if you want something different to happen in your life, how is that going to happen unless you do something different, right? Like what do they say? Like the definition of an insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right? If you want something different to happen in your life, you've got to do something different. Now, of course, anytime that we move outside our comfort zone, it's natural to feel some fear because we haven't done it before. We don't know what the outcome's going to be. But it's, no progress is made from inside the comfort zone, right? So, and you also have control over, whether you take a giant leap, you jump off, do a dive off an Acapulco cliff, or if you stick your toe in the baby end of the pool. Like you can decide how quickly and how deep you want to go. And, sometimes just taking that little baby step and getting comfortable and being like, okay, this isn't too bad. A lightning bolt didn't strike me dead. Okay, I'm going to take another baby step. If you keep doing that, you'll make progress over time.
That's such an important lesson you shared there in thinking about, you don't have to get it all done at once, right? There can be incremental steps. You can start this journey while working at another career as you did, right? You started to think about this and sort of lay the groundwork for it before you even left your corporate job.
Right.
And what would you say about, for you, what was that transition like? You went through some specific training, did you not?
Yeah, I did. When I was thinking about leaving, I was doing a lot of exploration. I was having conversations. Like I said, I was interviewing, I was reading books, just trying to figure out. I knew that where I was didn't feel right, but I wasn't sure what direction to go in. And through networking, I actually met somebody whose wife had gone through the coach training program that I went through. And I don't even know how we got on the topic, but I was talking to him about where I was in my career. And he said, oh my gosh, you sort of sound like my wife. She was a PR professional for many years. And she just sort of got to a point where it wasn't that fulfilling for her. And so she decided to become a coach. And he's explaining all this to me. And I was like, wow, that sounds so interesting. He introduced me to her, and she went through the IPEC program, which is Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, which is one of the top coach training programs in the country. And, after talking with her and hearing what her experience was like and what her career was like since she started her own business, I became a lot more interested. And that just sort of led me down the path to research that program and some other programs. And ultimately, I decided to enroll. And I'm so glad that I did. It really was a huge pivot point, not just in my career, but in my life, because I guess I realized that I've always sort of been a coach at heart. And, to be among other people, because going through the program, there were surprisingly, actually a lot of people from marketing and communications and advertising backgrounds, but also, people who were professional psychologists or worked in sales. Entrepreneurs, lots of HR, of course, that's a lot of people from HR go into coaching also. But bottom line, I was among I call them fellow travelers, that people that sort of see the world in a similar way, want to help others, most of the people that were in the program were already successful professionals in another area and wanted to make a pivot, much like I did.
I love the key themes in here, Terry. You've got understanding, facing your fear, understanding, thinking about what you're good at, trying to define success for yourself, and coming up with a roadmap forward, which was learning, growing, going through this training program. As I made my own pivot, I got this amazing advice from this woman, and I'll never forget it. And she said, if you want to figure out what to do next, after I left Wall Street and was thinking about what to do next, and she said, go immerse yourself in something and your value proposition will manifest itself. And I remember thinking, what are you, Yoda? I didn't quite get it at first. And as I continued down that journey, it's exactly what happened. And it sounds like something like that kind of happened for you here. And here you are now. And this led you to writing your book, right?
Yeah. I think that I've always been a creative person, and working in marketing, that's definitely something that most marketers, tap into to do marketing, because there is definitely a creative aspect to marketing. But I also feel like in some ways that had been sort of pushed to the side a little bit. And to me, it's important to be able to use that part of myself. I get a lot of enjoyment out of being creative. And when I first left my job, I actually said to myself, like, what do you want to do? Like, what would be fun for you? Because I kind of felt like I think I mentioned that the last job that I was in, it wasn't actually one that I wanted. As often happens in the corporate world, they're like, we want you to be in this job. And it doesn't matter whether I wanted to be in the job. It was like, okay, I'll do my best.
Is that voluntold? Is that what that is?
Voluntold. Yes, I was voluntold to be in that role. I felt like I kind of needed to detox a little bit when I left, and I actually ended up doing 2 weeks at Second City in their summer intensive program for improv. And
the famous comedy club in Training Force.
The famous comedy club where, all the greats, Tina Fey and John Belushi and Dan Aykroyd, all those folks came out of Second City. And man, what fun. I really felt like I got back in touch with this very young, creative, playful part of myself. And it kind of like unblocked some of that, creative energy that I had to just go and play. Cause you have to be very much in the moment to do improv. And I wasn't like an actor or anything like that, but I just always had thought like, maybe I'll do that. And so when I had the time, I just did it. And what fun, really, what fun. Really helped me to see the world from sort of a different perspective. And again, to meet people, I was super interested to learn. People come from around the world to go to Second City. I mean, there was somebody from Singapore, from London, from all over the United States, Australia in my class.
Wow.
And, all ages from, I was actually one of the older people, but there were a couple college kids that were in there. There were some people that were acting professionally. And then there were, some older professionals, like people that did other things like child psychology and, stuff like that.
What an experience. Was this before or after? So this was after you left the corporate America, if you will. Was it before or after you went through the IPAC program?
It was, I think I had started the IPEC program, but the program is sort of like a hybrid of you do three-day weekend over the course of 6 months. And then you have 12 weeks of virtual training online. It's live, but it's, online on Zoom in between. And then after you get done with the training, you have it took me 2 months to get the certification after that. So I had started IPEC, but it was like during one of the virtual training times. So I had the time to go to Second City.
So you've left corporate America. You've sort of sought this learning structure with this program with IPAC. And in the middle of this, you thought, I'm going to try something creative out here. Did anyone else where was this moment where you were thinking, I need to go to Second City and learn how to do comedy? How did that come together? That's a fascinating one.
I had worked with somebody who had done an intensive at Second City. And I'd been to Second City, to see some of the improv shows, just for a night out. And I just was intrigued by it, and I also kind of felt like it was something that, felt a little bit scary,
I bet.
I guess I was like just in that mind space of like, hey, I just jumped out of the airplane. Like, what else can I do? What other airplane can I jump out of? I'm going to do this. And this actually has a direct connection to the book because I did the first summer, I did 2 weeks of improv training. And then I loved it so much that the next summer I was like, what can I do? I was looking at their courses for the summer, and they had a 1 week long storytelling intensive where you'd go in and for 3 hours a day, you'd be taught how to do, tell stories. And there were maybe about 10 other people in my class. And what we did every day was, the teacher would give you an assignment, and they teach some, and then you'd have to go home that night and come up with a story and then come in the next day and tell your story, just stand up and tell your story. And I heard so many fascinating stories and, people told stories about their careers, about their lives. And I think that there were 3 people from that storytelling class that I asked to interview for the book. Mainly because they told some really cool stories about their careers. And I was so inspired by them that I thought, my book is about career happiness, and this is their story about their career. I want to share it so others can be inspired in the way I was about what their journey looked like.
So many interesting pieces of the puzzle here, Terry, right? What I find fascinating is you faced your fear, you faced your happiness, you defined your happiness. You took the plunge, jumped out of the airplane, started with this program with IPEC, well, took some time off, went to IPEC. I would argue sort of a left brain training. Then you went for this right brain training, the improv work, which is, the creative work. And then in the midst of this, as the serial entrepreneur that you clearly are, you find people to like network with and get into your book, Winning the Game of Work. So, what is the book about? Why is work a game?
Such a great question. Yeah, exactly. I know this is the way we make money. This is serious, right? This isn't a game. This is not child's play. I am a first generation college graduate. My dad was like a union guy that worked for the phone company. I can actually remember at my first job talking with him and saying, Dad, I want to ask for a raise. Like, how do I ask my boss for a raise? And he said, I don't know. The union negotiates that for me. And I was like, okay, clearly I'm not going to get guidance from him on how to navigate in this corporate environment, right? And my mom, she worked for the post office. So I wasn't going to get the guidance that you need, like when you're working corporate roles like I was. And so I became sort of like a keen observer of what seemed to work. At first I was very puzzled by like, okay, that guy doesn't seem to work very hard, but he just got promoted. How did that happen? Or, I was just happens, like right? Paying attention to things and I was curious. And then I read books and I had some good mentors along the way that sort of opened my eyes up to how you really navigate. And over time, it just occurred to me that, most people, I kind of think of it as like the Matrix, right? Like in the Matrix, there's like this part that you see, and then there's the stuff that's going on underneath that's actually controlling what we see, right?
The movie, The Matrix, you're talking about.
Yeah, yes, the movie, The Matrix with Keanu Reeves. Yeah. And I think work is like that. A lot of people just go in and they're like, hey, I show up, I, sit at my desk, I do whatever I do, and I get paid, right? And there's not really a recognition that there's more to it than that. And if you can look at work like a game, that means that you're not going to just like, zoom in like you're in the middle of a scrum in rugby where you're so close to what's going on that you can't see the bigger picture, right? And so often people are like, I've seen it with a lot of high achievers that when they run into challenges, they double down. They're just like, oh, I'm going to work harder. I'm going to do more. I'm going to, go faster. That a lot of times just exacerbates the frustration with work. And so if you take that rugby analogy, if you zoom out, maybe football might be a better thing. Like if you zoom out, you can start to see the whole field, right? And you can start to recognize like, where are my places, where are the openings where I can navigate here? Right? Like who else am I playing against? Like what's their style? What are their hot buttons? What do I need to know? What's expected of me? Right? Like what's my role? Where should I be on the field? These are all things that we need to think about. And there's really only 3 ways to add value in at least a for-profit company. And it's that you're helping them make money, save money, or reduce risk, which really is helping them save money. And I think most people don't think of what they do in that way. They're not looking at it through that lens. They're like, hey, my job is to run reports, or my job is, if you're selling, that you're helping them make money. But every function within an organization needs to be connected to one of those ways of adding value. And when we start to think that way, we start to see opportunities to add more value, or we might start to see opportunities to stop doing things that we're doing or find better ways of doing the things that we're doing. And basically, that's just becoming a smarter player of the game of work, right? But, if we're not thinking about like really what the objectives are, and then we're really not playing the game.
So you had this sort of new experience because your family, right, didn't come from this type of background. You're there, you're observing, you're learning, continuing to learn, clearly a big theme for you. Mm-hmm. You start to recognize that, hey, there's things happening here that don't make any sense to me, like the person getting promoted where they don't work that hard. So thinking about game as a work and how you add value is a big part of this, but games have rules. So how do I figure out the rules of the game on my company?
Yeah. Well, for one thing, buy my book because that
Winning the Game of Work.
This is the objective of this book, is for me to share the unwritten rules of the game of work that I learned the hard way by getting in and getting knocked around, and then finally realizing like, oh, I need to move out of this area and get over here so that, I can have more impact. But I think observe, right? Talk to your boss. What are the expectations, right? So many people don't do that. They just show up and make assumptions about, this is what I think I should be doing, right? And if there's conflict or they're not having the success that they expect, it might be because there's not clarity of expectations. You're assuming some things and you need to get clarity on that. So some people approach work almost like it's school, right? Like, hey, and I've had this happen whenever I was a manager where, somebody who's been working in a role for a year and they'll come and say, okay, I'm ready to be promoted to the next level. I've learned how to do everything in this role. I'm ready to be promoted. And that's not how it works, right? You're there to provide value for the organization. And in order to move into another role, like you've got to demonstrate that you're going to add value in that role. And sometimes the business just isn't in a position to need somebody in that role. So it's not like school, like when you get done with 10th grade, you get promoted to 11th grade, right? So, but I mean, I know this stuff is pretty, you worked for a long time and to you, this is obvious, but yet I see a lot of people even that are pretty experienced or have worked for a long time, and they're very frustrated about not getting promoted. And yet they're not playing the game, if you will. They're not asking the questions like, what would I need to do to get promoted? Like, where does the company need me to step up and do something different or to do more or innovate? Where can they add more value? Because typically when you start to add more value, and then they want you to do more of that. So they'll probably give you more responsibilities so that you can add more value for the organization.
I would agree that it's a basic sounding concept, this sort of 10th to 11th grade thing. But at the same time, we've been indoctrinated with this our whole lives, right? Yeah. Once I finish this, I move on to that. I had friends when I began in corporate America in the late 90s who, if they didn't get promoted in a year, they quit and left. Oh, well, it's a year. I should be doing something better now. And they moved on. And many times, this whole grass isn't greener thing, they ended up not being particularly enthusiastic about what came next. And so I think this mindset's been indoctrinated in us. So I love this idea of seeking out mentorship, thinking about how do I add value. I remember a mentor early on in my career said to me, take on more responsibility, find ways to add value. And more importantly, communicate what your goals are to your boss. And every time I sat through a quarterly review with my boss, I'd say, hey, if there's an opportunity for me to fill in for a role above my pay grade, if you will, I'd love to be thought of for that. And it took a few quarters, but suddenly I got put in these positions to really challenge myself. And those moments were some of the biggest changes in my career. So thank you for bringing that point around.
Yes. Well, I mean, I talk specifically about what you just said. Let your boss know, because I think a lot of times people just assume that my boss must know that I want to be promoted. And having been a manager, I can tell you not everybody does. Some people like what they're doing and they want to do it until they retire, right? And that's fine, right? We need people that are just going to be like the steady Eddie, consistent folks that come in and do a particular role. But if you want to do more, you need to let somebody know about that. And sometimes it also means like volunteering. One of the things I thought was really interesting in my last job is the marketing department was always very involved in the United Way campaign. And I can remember offering somebody on my team sort of like a, volunteer type role. And she was ambitious about getting ahead, but she said, oh no, I'm too busy. I'm too busy with work. I don't have time to do that. And the thing that I found was that a lot of times when you do these extra volunteer things, that you become known to a lot more people in the organization, and then they actually offer you more opportunities, right? So maybe you're going to spend some time volunteering and doing stuff off the side of your desk while you're doing your day job, but people are like, oh, wow, that person's so smart and they're great to work with and they're creative or whatever. And then they think of you when other opportunities come up, because there is risk in hiring or promoting people. And, because we've seen it, right? That people get promoted because it's the next logical step and they wash out because they haven't necessarily demonstrated their ability to do that, right? But if you do take on additional responsibility and maybe perform above your pay grade by saying, hey, let me work on that special project, or let me volunteer for this, or whatever, you're demonstrating your ability to do more. So if they do promote you, you're already halfway there. So it's reduced the risk of them, providing that. And I think that a lot of times people think that, from standing still, that they should just be catapulted to that level. And that's risky for everybody. It's risky for them. It's risky for the organization. So sometimes you have to overperform where you are just to help people feel more confident that you can do it.
I really appreciate this concept of tying together these key themes, which is, how do you find a way to de-risk a promotion for both parties, right? The person wanting to get promoted and the person who's offering the promotion. And what a great roadmap to do it through these sort of mini auditions, finding these opportunities to volunteer where, it's a new project. If it doesn't go well, it happens, but at least you had a chance to showcase some of your broader skills and maybe develop some new skills. So finding that mentor, getting that audition moment, if you will, inside as a volunteer opportunity. I can tell you, volunteering outside my company, it was early on in my career, was one of the best things I ever did. I got that advice from a mentor. And he said, you need to round out your skill set. I went and sought some work with fundraising. I was in sales, fundraising for an organization. And honestly, it went very well. And that really helped change my career. So Terry, thinking about the person that's, you've worked with so many different executives now, working 50, 60, 70 hours a week, right? Where do they even start? How do you even carve out the time to think about these things?
Well, it's, thanks for asking that question. And it's so common. I mean, I talked about it a little bit before that, sometimes high achievers will just double down on what's worked for them in the past. And particularly if people are individual contributors and they're moving into a management into, like a director role, that sometimes they don't take the time to mentally promote themselves and identify the leverage points that they have at their disposal to, when you think about a lever, right? Like you don't have to pick up the rock. You can use a lever with less force to lift the rock, right? And so where do you look for those leverage points so you can get more done with less effort? I worked with somebody a few years ago who had been promoted and she was actually a team leader where she had 8 people. It's kind of a player coach. She got promoted to be the head of a department of 50. And when she was a team leader, if somebody was falling behind on work, she'd just jump in and take stuff off their plate just to keep the team moving ahead. When she became the leader of a group of 50, she just did the same thing. And when we started working together a few months after she'd been promoted, she said to me, I'm considering asking my boss to demote me back to my old role. And I was like, no, please, no. Like, don't do that. Let's work together. Let's see if we can identify these leverage points where you can get more done. You're not working 70 hours a week anymore. Because she was really at the end of her rope because, she's a working mom and she took so much work home with her on the weekends that she didn't have time to spend with her family. And it just really wasn't sustainable. But, the simplest thing that we started with was just closing her door for a couple hours a day because she had this belief, going back to what we were saying before about beliefs driving behavior. Her belief was that I want to be an open door manager, that people can come to me at any time. So she had her door open all day long. She came in really early. That was the only time she could get undivided work done, right? So I said, close your door a couple hours. So she actually was able to start getting her own work done at work so she didn't have to take so much home. But we had to overcome this belief that she had that people were going to, think that she was a cold, unapproachable manager. And I was like, no, just tell them, that you need to get your own work done. And that was one thing, but it was just like building process, communicating, identifying training opportunities so that she could fully delegate to people because she was just very overly involved with too many things in the department. So she really was, it was one-to-one leverage, right? That's no leverage at all, right? She needed to get much more leverage and she had lots of resources to use. She just wasn't using them efficiently. But once she learned how to look at it that way, she was able to reduce her number of hours down to, about 55 hours a week, which is still a lot, but that's not uncommon, as we know.
So that's a fantastic case study you just shared. And I love this analogy you used to sort of zooming out from the sports field, the football field, to see a bigger picture of what's going on. How do I identify that leverage for myself and that influence I can create out there? How does someone get that done?
Well, I think a good place to start is the pain points, because if you can figure out where it hurts, that's where you need to fix it, right? In her case, it was that, she's working 70 hours a week and she doesn't have time to spend with her family, right? So she couldn't do less, or, the department was still responsible for a certain amount of work, but she had to figure out how to get more done without her being so involved, right? And it could be, I just think, like, what can you do differently at these pain points? Get curious about that, and again, don't zoom in, which is, 99% of the time, that is the first instinct for any high achiever, is like, I guess I just got to buckle down. I'm just going to have to burn the midnight oil.
Swing the hammer harder, right? Yeah.
Yes. Stop, take a deep breath. Even though it's going to be anxiety inducing, zoom out, look at the big picture, start to get curious. Can somebody help me? Can I organize more? One of the tools that I reference constantly with my clients is the Eisenhower matrix, which is you've got urgency on one axis and you've got importance on the other axis. And of course, people always will do the important and urgent things. But usually the second thing that they work on is the urgent and not important, right? It's the dinging of your email box, right? And you're like, what's this message say? Oh, okay, it's a piece of junk mail, right? But you just lost your focus, right? What we don't tend to work on is the important and not urgent, right? And so usually we don't even pay attention to that until it's become urgent. So then it feels like we're just constantly on that hamster wheel, right? Constantly, there's never a break. But if we can learn how to say, okay, this is urgent but not important, there are ways to deal with that. You can delegate that. You can build systems where people can self-serve. You can just say, you can get used to, people standing at your door expecting something and just tell yourself, like, that can wait, right? But the things that you should be focusing on are the important and not urgent. And sometimes that can be building the system, right? Like, how do you hold those folks off so you build the system so that this fire drill doesn't keep happening? It's handled systematically.
You've talked about is finding this objectivity in the middle of this distraction and stress and working 50, 60, 70 hours a week. If I'm somebody who feels like I'm frustrated, I've lost that objectivity, what's one thing I could do today to try to reach through and think about that? You talked about the pain points, but what action can I take tomorrow to try to push through and find that objectivity?
Well, not to be self-serving, John, but this is what coaches do, right? Like I always say, people can't read the label from inside the bottle, right? Because we're walking around being ourselves and, we've got sort of our blinders on, seeing the world just the way that we've seen it. And sometimes it's helpful to have somebody that can hold the mirror up to you so you can see, oh, what's it say on the outside of my bottle here? Or can we peel these blinders back a little bit so we can start to see, like, oh, there are more options for how I show up and what I do than what I have habitually done, right? But it doesn't have to be a coach. It can be a mentor. It can be a colleague, right? If you've got a colleague that seems to have things under control and, maybe is good at things that you're not good at, maybe you can ask them, like, how do you get it all done? You seem to be able to do things on the weekend and I'm taking work home. So what am I missing?
Yeah, I think there's such a great theme here of just sort of taking a step back and being curious and looking around and not being afraid to be a little bit vulnerable and ask people for help. I find that is a big roadblock for so many people. They think if I ask somebody for help, they're going to think I'm weak or I can't get it done. There's something wrong with me, right? And certainly couldn't be any further from the truth. I found people want to help you, but you've got to you've got to initiate the conversation.
Well, I think the other thing too, and I wrote about this in the book, when I was writing the book, I was doing some secondary research. I came across research by Tom DeLonge, who's a professor at Harvard Business School, who has studied high achievers. And his hypothesis is that high achievers are addicted to external validation. And so what we tend to do, and if you think back to kindergarten, getting that first gold star on the paper, right? We're like, oh, I got a gold star. I'm going to keep doing the thing I've been doing. I'm going to like go home and do my homework rather than running out to play after school, right? We start to delay gratification, and we start to look at, people outside of us to get that validation, like, hey, I'm okay. But at some point, and particularly when we get into leadership roles, we've got to shift back to being able to validate ourselves. I'm not saying that we don't pay attention to what our boss wants, but we have to balance it with our own judgment and perspective and decision making, right? Because in business, every decision has risks, right? And when you're optimizing, there's usually not a perfectly clear option, right? Everything has some, pro or con. There's always some risk associated with it. And so we have to say to ourselves, like, I'm smart. I can figure this out. What risk am I willing to take? What is logical? And not to be so driven by fear that, like, oh, if you make a mistake or if your boss is momentarily unhappy with you, that it's dangerous, because it's not. And when I'm not saying it's definitely not, but usually, if your boss is irritated with you one afternoon, that doesn't mean you're going to get fired the next day, right? It might just be a signal that you need to do something different, right? But we do have to keep moving things forward. And there's not always going to be a clear path that's been validated by other people, right? We have to say, what do I think? I'm smart, I'm accomplished. What do I think I need to do, right? And what we're talking about here is leadership, right? And like leaning into your own abilities and validating them yourself. You don't need to wait for somebody else to say, hey, John, you're great. You're smart. You can just say, yeah, I know I am, right? And so I'm going to lean into that.
Own your journey, continue to learn, ask for help from others, seek out a coach. So many great lessons here. And I really respect and appreciate the fact that you put them all into a book, Winning the Game of Work. Thinking about the book, and as we close out here, Terry, think about, how would you say the book has impacted your life and changed it or your career?
It is hard to even communicate all of the ways that it has broadened my world. Just the process itself of having to face my own fears of, like, is anybody going to care about this stuff? Can I do it? Is it going to be good? Like, just going through writing the book itself was a growth opportunity for me. And then having it be out there and having people respond to it. It's content that I use every day in my coaching now, right? And just in learning how to promote. I mean, unfortunately, my book came out in April of 2020, like right after the lockdown, right? So no book signings, no book launch parties, anything like that. So I got into pitching myself to podcasts so I could promote it. And so I've probably been on, more than 200 podcasts at this point. And so that's been, really confidence building for me. It's exposed me to a lot more people that approach me about working with me, whether one-on-one or, as a consultant with their business. So it's really opened up a lot of doors that way. And because I loved podcasting so much, I actually decided to start my own podcast, which you mentioned, the Marketing Mambo. So it's opened up many doors, and it's increased my confidence, just even what I was just talking about, like learning to validate yourself, that the more that you put yourself out there and the more that you realize I didn't go splat on the tarmac after I jumped out of the plane. I just realized that there's so many more possibilities out here. And the more that you're out and being seen and being heard, the more doors that open for you.
Terry McDougall, not afraid to get outside of her comfort zone, and certainly reaping the benefits of that, and broadening your horizon, broadening your network, building a business, having a book out there in the world, hosting a podcast, being a guest on 200 plus. Absolutely incredible story, winning the game of work. And even after almost 2 years out, still a top 15 seller in your category. That's Impressive. Congratulations. Terry, if people want to learn more about you and your book, your company, where might they go to do that?
Well, they can go to my website at terrybmcdougall.com. And if they go to my website, they want to talk to me, they can set up time on my calendar there to do an exploratory call. Of course, the book's on Amazon and barnesandnoble.com. The podcast is at marketingmambo.net, as well as on all of the podcast platforms. And then I also have a kind of a coaching community where people can go to subkit.com/Coach Terry to see what some of the offerings are out there.
That is awesome. Great book, great coaching services, just an unbelievable track record you put together here. Can't thank you enough for being on the show here today, Terry, and sharing your story with us.
John, thanks for having me. It was a lot of fun.
A pleasure is all mine. I'm the host of the Creator Community, John Saunders. Keep moving forward.